Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for stopping by the channel. So for this video, we're going to be taking a look at a fairly affordable entry into Ball watches in their Enterprise Fireman. Now, I've actually featured a number of different Ball watches on my channel in the past, and if you're not familiar with this brand, they tend to have their roots in the train and railroad industry, as their founder, Webb C. Ball, helped develop railroad standard time. Now, these timepieces tend to have a few signatures to them. Specifically, Ball uses tritium gas tubes to help with low light legibility on their dial and handset. And given their roots in the railroad industry, they also focus on making their watches fairly shock resistant and anti-magnetic. I've actually been impressed with every Ball watch that's come across my desk, and I do think that they are an underrated brand. And typically that means you can get a really good discount on these watches on the secondary market compared to their retail price. And that is the case with this particular watch. I was able to pick up this one from another Canadian watch enthusiast for a fairly affordable price. Now, it's already been beaten up a little bit, but I think it really adds to the character of these watches. So why don't we flip the camera around now, and you guys can check out this Ball Enterprise Fireman up close in the studio. So as near as I can tell, this Ball Fireman falls within the Enterprise family from this brand, which I think is intended to be a little bit more elegant than some of their sportier models, but it's still actually very durable. With respect to dimensions, you're getting a 40mm case diameter. If you flip this watch to the side, the lug-to-lug profile, so between my thumbs right here, comes in at 48.4mm, and you can see that these are like teardrop lugs that just curve and hug your wrist very well. Case thickness I measure at 11.4mm from the bottom of the screw down case back to the top of the flat sapphire crystal. Although if you were to grab it at the top of a Cyclops at the 3 o'clock position, the overall height is 12mm, although that's still very reasonable for a watch that uses tritium tubes on the dial and to also clear the handset that's there as well. And then the other measurement I'll talk about is the lug opening for the supplied OEM bracelet is a nice even 20mm. You can see that the first end link here is female and it articulates very well. And this bracelet is actually a straight 20mm from the head of the watch all the way to the Ball Railroad signed clasp here. And it's a butterfly sign clasp, and you can see it's got this nice railroad engraving here, which means you have to open that section of the clasp first, and then you can open up the other one as well. This bracelet is extremely well constructed, although I'm personally not a fan of butterfly clasps, because the clasp itself doesn't give you micro adjustment holes. You do get half links, which I took out. And then if you did want to size the individual links, they're very substantial slot screws which are easy to remove. And there's no flex to the bracelet. And you can see that there's a bit of contrast between brushed and polished intermediate links here. So overall, the construction of the bracelet and the case is done extremely well. Now let's focus in on the dial, because I really like the execution that Ball has here. You have very high contrast with this matte black textured dial in white printing for it, where it says Ball below the 12 o'clock, and also the automatic and 100-meter water resistance rating just above the 6. You have very nice elongated baton style tritium tubes for all of the hour markers, except at the 3 o'clock position, which still has a truncated hour marker. But then, of course, you have a nice cutout for the date, and then you have a sapphire magnifying Cyclops over it. So it's really nice to get a good glance of time. Quite easy to read, especially in any lighting situations, because I did mention that Ball does use tritium gas tubes. So if you're not familiar with the use of tritium gas, It's essentially a form of hydrogen that decays over time, and that gas is encapsulated in each individual tube that's coated with a phosphorescent paint. That paint absorbs the decay from the tritium over time and releases energy in the form of visible light. So these are self-activating. You don't need any external light source like you would for luminescent paint. And the half-life for these tritium tubes is about 12 years. Now, when talking about the handset, I think Ball did a very nice job. You have some dolphin-style hands for the hour and minute hand, and then you have a very fine-tip seconds hand that has the counterbalanced RR for a railroad standard on the edge. And then, of course, you also have a tritium tube that sticks out at the other end of the seconds hand. I do wish that the seconds hand was slightly longer, just so it extended all the way out to actually touch the running minutes track that's printed there. But differentiating all of the hands is quite easy to do because of the use of the tritium tubes and the differing lengths between them all. So as you can read on the dial, this is an automatic watch. Ball uses a worked over ETA 2824-2 in this watch, which is a Swiss workhorse movement with about 38 hours of power reserve. Ticks away at 4 Hertz for that nice sweep on the seconds hand. It's hacking and hand wind. Ball also has their own patented system. I think it's called the Enterprise, that is utilized on the balance wheel and balance spring just to prevent shocks. And as I mentioned, this watch does have some anti-magnetic properties just based on the case construction. Now, flipping the watch to the side, in order to operate this movement, you have a very nice oversized railroad style crown. There is no crown guards here, but it's very easy to grip even with gloved hands. And once you unscrew the crown in the open position, you can manually wind this movement. If you were to pop it out to the intermediate position, you can quickly cycle through the different days of the month. And then, of course, if you pull it to extremity, you can hack the balance and stop the seconds hand. And then you can set to any reference time that you would like. Let's quickly talk about the case finishing and the bracelet. So the case and bracelet are full 316L stainless steel. Some of their higher end models use 904L steel, just like Rolex does. And also, a lot of their watches from the Engineer family have a similar case profile to Oyster style case from Rolex. I actually prefer this style of case that Ball went with here. You have very nice fine polishing on the sides of the case, but you do have those nice polished bevels on the lugs, and then the top of the case is nicely brushed where the lugs are. You can see that the bezel itself is multi-stepped, and you have a mix between brushing and high polish as you get towards the top of the sapphire crystal here. And when you get to the bracelet, I like how these lugs just terminate quite abruptly and they're not really sharp. So even if you want to throw this watch on a strap instead of keeping it on the bracelet, it's very comfortable and the lugs don't really poke out or get really sharp anywhere. Now I want to show you guys the case back for this watch because Ball always excels at their engraving. And you can see that you do have a train for this Enterprise Fireman, just feeding into their prestigious history within the railroad industry. And here's a quick wrist shot just to show you how well this Ball Fireman sits on my 19 centimeter circumference wrist. That is about 7.5 inches if you're going with the imperial measurements. And I'll mention, sized up for my wrist on this bracelet, the watch comes in at a healthy 147 grams. So it still gives you some wrist presence, even though it does look a little bit more elegant. And of course, with the tritium gas tubes, you can read this watch from across the room, even when there's no lighting situation anywhere. So that about wraps up my overview for this Ball timepiece. In terms of pricing, you can typically expect to pay between 900 to 1,000 Canadian dollars, just depending on the condition of these watches. And at that price, I do think you're getting a lot of watch for the money. This watch is quite versatile as well, because as I mentioned at the start, it's a little bit more elegant than other Ball specific models, but you can still make this quite sporty, and it's nice to switch up the look on different straps as well. I mean, of course, there were some minor nitpicks. I think the Cyclops at the date is kind of take it or leave it. There are certain Enterprise models that actually don't have a Cyclops to begin with. The second hand could extend a little bit longer just to touch the edge of the dial and the running minutes track. And I really do think Ball needs to up their game at the level of this clasp because it's really not that comfortable. It would be nice if they could use this same type of bracelet but have a fold over clasp with some micro adjustment just to improve the overall wearability and comfort for this timepiece. But as always guys, I'd also love to hear your feedback in the description of this video. What are your thoughts of Ball as a Swiss independent manufacturer, and what do you think about this Enterprise Fireman? If you do enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. It helps me out a lot. And as always, I can't wait to catch you guys in the next video.